Trong den de jambe yong la sa sa lo khang ge lo de jem nye den nye dra nom da rap sa la ve chi nye den gen chi jen ze nye je tu gra le wan zen kong da se be zhen ren ma ri min tam dung e chi ze ve ro soi kong da bu che tar yin lai zhu ju yong den song zhu drai che zhu nye mo ni long le je cha zhu zhu ze xin ma ri mi se le dung ren yu gu chi nye chen ze ra zhe nam den ne ta jin sa ju tar sen yun den lu zo jia se tu yu gu Chödrak chödan chöni jende davlem ezen jambe yong la endu Zedene cheje chenra vesre je davle dem menba rapsarane Kadan tenje zhong lo tokwa ye lo je pop non wa za du soro Kongge tu Jänner zone tawa nam je pong ze ba tu din chen zhen zhong ten ba kong ko dam de la da sha ca jam yang sha na du je chen re se sa yi nian bo zhe ba nam par se re nam ge nian bo shan ba kun du zong ye we se xin je la ge sha ca xie jie kan la chen rab jin gu re jian zai be dong du je len la po yer we ten ba kun ne san zai be ga yu ren bo sha la sha jie wo cher rab kun du si ye ta ni le tam ge sam me sha li yong zong xin shang ju yin be lam ken karma ba mi xie de be ji wu zu ge du na so de ne ro na kan da nyam be sim jian tam ji san ji ji sa la gu gu nyam be gu nong chong chu chu de tu jie de tam be chu sim ba ra shu.
So please begin by generating the Bodhi mind, which is about focusing on the well-being of all sentient beings in number as vast as the sky, with the intention to guide all of them without a single exception to Buddha, the enlightened state.
La so tene ta khasan masal li ge chwa khashi indu tongba te lein pyu gi
So today we'll begin with answering the remaining questions from the previous question and answer session, which is the following. In the Chenrezig meditation, the practice method set forth by Songtsen Khenpo, there is a segment which concerns the mantra recitation. One recites the mantra while contemplating that the sound issued forth by way of pronouncing the mantra has such a force to it that it's heard by all sentient beings in all worldly existences and thus benefits them. One also meditates that light emanates out to all sentient beings, bringing them relief from suffering and the like. Now, the person who asks the question here says, well, in his case, this is about training in this method. He is not able to make this happen, namely that his mantra recitation is heard by all beings in all worldly existences and so on. However, he does the practice, or he trains in this practice in the hope of being able to benefit beings, as was just described, one day. So he's aware of that his capacity is limited. I'm not quite sure I understand that. And he says that he was thinking in the following way, namely that the effect of training in this way, the effect of practicing in this way, may be enhanced if he, the meditator, and here I'm a bit lost, he writes that the effect of him training in this way might be enhanced by way of him thinking specifically of the milliards and milliards of beings who die every split second. And if the sound of the mantra recitation and the light that emanates from Chenrezig in terms of the meditation, if both the sound and the light would reach them in the moment of their death, and the period just after their death, could that be more effective in benefiting? So I suppose the question then is, if the practitioner thinks about the milliards and milliards of beings who die every split second, if you think of that category of sentient beings in specific, would that thought be helpful in terms of enhancing the power of the mantra recitation and the power of the light rays in terms of benefiting them? I suppose that's the question. And therefore, can he meditate in this way? Would it be possible to obtain a stronger effect by that additional focus? Det känns som det kan.
Att sen kommer som. Kan så det det gott han tycker
det. Da Chenrezig om det chedu. Da Khenpo luk song sen Khenpo de gi dengyo sarwa. Tene da gongi chashi da drup tab digi chashi chik terwa. Nga di döndu nga gi dradang la tenne semchen tamche la pempa chik dang ösu trodde la tenne gompa la tenne semchen tamche pempa chik yore da korang mi palpa indu di pempa di ngoma drup tuggemindus korang da di jangi yu trengendus di yina yang ta semchen la ngoma pempa chik tupe reva in sarava da nga de döndu ösu trodde de gomdu tene dra tedang ösu teni da kechik marere da jiktin tame pa yorwa ta semchin yang gi changa dang masona tame parwa tanda rang shi roken so gichetu yin trenne tetse pempa de shukshiru tang tubgyunduge samlo dendre tangwala tenne trigger sarbo
yeah that jetan dere tanda sajade yabulu bichi jenesi gantam none re tene maniti donkin konsa tenne mani dadong de nanam do yenge töna pinche da chung ge chamare jetan manige mani bemme hong seve drate manige drate
am chu cooking gi chetu mare
말은 덩킹게 체도 말에 디 드라데 샘진 순라지가 나놈도 되나
me de koran koduga semchen tamche di kona tene de manigi drade kona koran sola pendro gendo
nga sosuje ore
de
tugimendus ede di sama tango mare
aha
mane dradang de su kona dradang ki manigi pinya de sheptre kabde du mato ndambapo konsa ke kotokpa juding ke konsa yinda mengi yawa shene shede bache mare.
Now regarding reciting the Mani mantra and explanations about the benefit in hearing the sound of the mantra when the mantra is pronounced. The benefits in this context do not concern whether the person who recites the mantra is a realized individual and therefore many more are benefited. It also does not concern the person the regular practitioner, not yet realized, who recites the mantra, and therefore not many being benefited because this practitioner has not yet attained any level of realization. The benefits explained here regarding the Mani mantra do not have anything to do with whether the person who recites is a person of realization or not. That's not the point at all. The benefits explained here concern the mantra itself and the recitation of it and the benefits that happen because of reciting the mantra. So it's the benefits originate with the mantra, not with the person who recites it. Of course, it's a good deed when a practitioner recites the mantra. But for the benefits explained to happen, it appears it's not a question of whether or not the person who recites is a realized individual or not. The benefits listed concern the nature of the mantra itself, as it were. So its benefits attributed to the mantra, irrespective of who recites it.
Perna manzamare zonga cheprachi kangan dishin lapti yore.
Now all so-called dharanis, all mantras, in and of themselves, as it were, carry the power of spiritual influence, irrespective of whether the person who recites the mantra in question is a person of realization or not. The qualities of the individual who recites, or the accomplishments or the absence of accomplishments of the person who recites, do in fact have nothing to do with the benefits and qualities set forth in the context of those various, in the contexts of those various mantras.
Zonga chepar jindan zola, nupatinde yongkoyate, sanje tamcheje, tongni ngonsum tokpe tutang,
tongni ngonsum tokpe tutang,
shangchub sem tarsimbate, tongni tang nije songdu jupa, tarsimbalatene.
It's rather that those mantras carry the capacities or qualities of all Buddhas in consequence of the Buddhas who came up with those mantras being individuals who had attained Buddha, the enlightened state, which is about a direct and comprehensive realization of the empty nature, the essencelessness of all things, in conjunction with having attained, as it were, the full scope of the Bodhi mind, which is about compassion at the level of Buddha, the enlightened state. So the mantra itself has the power, irrespective of what level of development the person who recites may or may not be at.
Person shubina, Pug Lombardovina, Lotoncha Green la, Lekalena young, Man the young Chergre, Pena, Shimba Gishim or Kabinanda, Shin Loto Jeb Kabinanda, the Zokanga, Mountain, Lamas of Lashay. Drop by Ina Jedam Pajuno, Oma Shob Kabinanda. Mart Zoe Kavinada. Tapan den Mani Yongs Chern Hungry.
For example, in Tibet, for over 1,000 years, the recitation of the Mani mantra was taught to the members of the population, and it became a habit of the Tibetan people to recite the Mani mantra. Very often in connection with a specific tune, as it were, while they worked either in the fields, as the farmers would do, or when with their cattle, as the nomads would.
Tene Tapasun drove Gablin at the Gadicha Omarwa, Tashunom, Combatsun to the man the young Cherny.
And when traveling, either on foot or on a horseback, in those days there were no cars and the like in the country, people would recite the Mani mantra while traveling. And there are innumerable different tunes used when reciting the mantra.
Ta korang lo men na che shongjub sem na lo yong de kin ten so la tang ke Khenpo yong kin ten so la manewa se ke ne ten kasa kal re tosa ro mane yong su cher ten de mangpo zebe lo ju yore.
For example, during the time of the great Siddha, the second Karmapakshi, many of his disciples were advised, disciples who had developed to quite some extent on the path of a Bodhisattva, were advised to walk around in the mountains and other areas. They were appointed to do so, as it were, in order to while walking around, recite the Mani mantra, and those practitioners became known as Mani Va, or Mani Was, I suppose one would say in English, adding an S for the plural, which simply means men of the Mani mantra, implying that these individuals in their practice, their main focus was that of, in this way, meditating and spreading in large areas the sound of the Mani mantra for the benefit of anyone, whether humans, animals, or otherwise, who lived in those areas. Oh, the logo. Yeah. There is an example in terms of the Karmakadi school today of a disciple of the previous Karmapa, a good friend of Khenpo Rinpoche, namely Lama Shirab Jansen Rinpoche, who holds this title, as it were, the title of Maniwa. And if you've ever seen the logo of his, or the letterhead of his stationery, it starts with the name of this title, Maniva Lama Shirab Jansen. And he, as soon as he has an opportunity, recites the Mani mantra with various tunes, the different ones that are traditionally used. And apparently he has quite a good voice, which Khenpo Rinpoche says he doesn't.
Nepal, Himalaya, Juta, Berg Sansam, Devege, Lomba Mongo, Shuja, T. looks at the Sultan, Lamaram Jikaden.
And because of the efforts of Lama Shirab Jansen Rinpoche, in the mountainous areas of Nepal that border with Tibet, he has re-established this tradition, and there are hundreds of thousands of people in those regions who do just this, as was the tradition in Tibet today. However, this is not a tradition exclusive to the Karma-Karya school of Tibetan Buddhism, not at all. All 4 schools of Tibetan Buddhism have this tradition.
단 덕인 공사기 차츠음이나 소수제오지 임봉도 땅나양 임빈 니지침부 끝나홍 비임빈게 셈지 라로용 데네송다 피엔데 용기여버래 됐다 똑바 초딩기 공사데 셈고.
So in terms of practitioners, a regular practitioner who has not yet attained any level of realization should, in terms of making the recitation effective, as it were, do mind training with the focus on developing compassion, great compassion for all sentient beings, and with that mindset recite the Mani Mantra. Of course, a person or a practitioner who has attained a higher level of realization, his recitation would presumably be more effective in terms of benefiting others. However, that's not the point made in terms of the benefits that come from reciting the Mani Mantra, the qualities, as it were, of the Mani Mantra itself.
Perna te khar cha degin de da mani ge zongha the inji chimbo tang samutong ba ni je le shong we rong da chi
the Mani Mantra, in terms of its nature, arose with so-called great compassion and a realization of profound emptiness. So the mantra itself embodies that kind of compassion and that kind of realization, irrespective of the qualities of the person who recites the mantra.
Ota recite chinkin te topatambo toningon som to top konsa yawa kama bando songa yina teni kung song tiang be de toni grang da chagyore tini nyam to den ni ba chegre.
In fact, the Mani Mantra expresses great compassion and realization of profound emptiness. Now, if the person who recites is a realized individual, like, for example, the Karmapa, tene?
Teta kongke toningon som to konsa chi ki song byoro. Tini donjo teang toni ni chi.
In that case, the qualities or benefits, as it were, listed in connection with the Mani Mantra pertain to both the individual who recites the mantra as well as the mantra.
Today, that re yena sosu che ge da yin shu shu re bana toni ni ji chim sem lo yong a ji gen da na yang ping sam ji mi sa ba yo.
However, a person without that kind of realization who recites the mantra, his recitation is still beneficial, provided it's the kind of practitioner who focuses on mind training methods by way of which he develops compassion.
Tene choachik tela perna pardo dan sarbatin zolla pinche greve se chi son.
Ah, yes, and in the question, the person who asked mentioned individuals in the so-called, in the state between death and a new rebirth, and possible benefits for them. And they are benefited by the recitation of the Mani Mantra, yes.
바도 서베 셈진된조 가반로그 간체고 근데 이미 뭐 맞으면 페나페 강을 문부지 텐데.
Now, individuals in the state between death and a new rebirth experience great difficulties because this is, as it were, unknown territory for them, and they have no idea of what will happen to them, and therefore go through great suffering. If individuals in this state hear the sound issuing forth when the Mani Mantra is recited, will be benefited by that.
karma pa kuntin chosamba dundu dojeke
Lasso?
tam magic shine karmic gone tumaj nangyo sar chinrezik gene 대두 다 감고는 바신 다시라 되네 단 안저와 체버진 게 단다 친세고 튕기면도 육대kin지게 다 받으시면 팽다고 제도도 스직대도 대 karmic gone 된지부지 진레스 야와염수 꾸르시네 발도 칸가 똥바서 선선고 통화 둘 코르도와 소차 동시로 먹지 내가 songs what the tindeg paint hobby
Khenpo Rinpoche gives another example from the life of the 13th Karmapa, Dundul Dorje, who, while reciting at the Karmagon monastery in the Kham region of Tibet, at one point, well, this happened frequently, but at one particular point he had been requested to pray for whether it was one or several deceased individuals, I do not know. However, it doesn't really matter whether it was a request regarding just one or a few individuals. And in response, he performed the Gyalva Gyamtso meditation, Gyalva Gyamtso being a specific aspect of the Bodhisattva Chenresi. And apparently in another region of Kham, a highly developed practitioner became aware of this on the basis of him having attained a high level of realization. By way of that, your cognitive skills are enhanced to the point that you can see, hear, and so on. You're aware of the doings of other individuals, even though these other individuals are at a very far distance. And he became aware of and reported that the 13th Karmapa, in these efforts just described, had been able to more or less at the time empty the bardo state, the state between death and a new rebirth, of those who were trapped in suffering there at the time.
제가 딱 Shangju Samba Chembo so that the Shem go at it. Naran so young Pensim song to go to song the 10 paint over.
So this is yet another example of the capacity of a realized individual. However, practitioners who have not yet attained such realization, still their practice of reciting the Mani Mantra and other practices do benefit others. Provided the practitioner's mindset is a mindset which focuses on compassion for others. And there is the next question. This person asks the following. It starts out with a description. He refers to the last topic of last week's teaching. However, that would have been the teaching before last week's teaching. Here, Khenpo Rinpoche described that one should never trust, or talked about that one should never trust one's own idea of something in terms of the teachings. One should not form a concept and cling to the concept, because this is not the intended result of study and contemplation. What then is the intended result? I imagine that such a process of study, contemplation and meditation is not so much about forming an end result that one can hold in the mind, a concept about what is true, as it were. Rather, the process might be about a change in the mind that occurs through going through these stages. So at the end of the process, the mind has changed, but the concepts formed during study, contemplation, and perhaps meditation too, do not play a role anymore. Once one has achieved this, the concepts one has worked with so far might as well be left behind, and what is left is just observing how one's mind works. Is that a correct understanding? Chi sung yu na nga da chengye mi du so ki sam lo tang ne da tu sam gom sung gi nyam len che ka che ne ra tene so gi dendi chi gin sa re sam son di chi ki dendi sam lo tu sam gom sung gi migul maris sam lo ya ma tang na tene de mina tu sam gom sung gi cha va la tene drub ju jag menar dropcha det karejina 3 years are. Ta ja mamma bushik. Ngani shita go söge men yindi 3 years are go.
Lasso dere. Tösam gamsam tenne. Nei area dram das zoeg tanda mare shubse.
What Khenpo Rinpoche said at the time was that the point of studies, contemplation and meditation is not to form a personal opinion, as it were, about what studies, contemplation and meditation are about. One would perhaps rather say studies, contemplation and meditation are not about forming personal opinions in terms of the meaning of any of the three practices, studies, contemplation and meditation.
Ti shuk tendere mato pena pesa to site sanno to situng gam to se jamne tumta sa so shuk sigi yo mare trikazo zog duwa ekayana singe tekba tende dayong duwa
this is rather about what happens today. Very often in Western Buddhist communities, namely that a person has studied a bit, contemplated a bit, and meditated a bit, and then draws the conclusion that he or she knows it all, as it were, based on his personal opinions and ideas of the meaning as to what he has studied, contemplated and meditated upon. There are individuals today who then even go on to start a new tradition. There is one here in Europe called Ekayana, which is simply the creation or simply the result of the personal ideas and opinions of a practitioner from a Buddhist community. And when Khenpo Rinpoche spoke of refraining from or explaining that this is not the purpose of studies, contemplation and meditation, to go on to express some personal opinions and start a new tradition at all. It was in this context that he said this.
Karirasana tosum gamsum ge miyute ram semjunde danda nganzo nyomu ge namto jeji jitong ko landro de yare
nyomu gina to yeah
di namton rotang de jurwa chitong.
The purpose, rather, of studies, contemplation and meditation is to rid the mind stream of afflictive, obscuring states expressed by way of thought, expressed in words, thoughts and deeds. And there is a traditional, in terms of Buddha Shakyamuni's doctrine, categorization into 84,000 types of afflictive, obscuring states. And the purpose of studies, contemplation and meditation is to rid the mind stream or empty the mind stream of all those afflictive, obscuring states in order to be able to attain Buddha, the enlightened state. The aim of studies, contemplation and meditation is not to set forth personal opinions about what one has studied or contemplated or meditated upon.
Danzin tang nyomong ki nyempur minro kenge.
Danzin dan
nyomong ki nyenpola.
Nyenpola.
Minro king. Ki tesam gamsam karchena ina injektin be topare. Kaya think marade.
Efforts in studies, contemplation and meditation as to Buddha Shakyamuni's doctrine, efforts here that do not result in the individual overcoming the notion of a real reality as to the individual and all other things, efforts that do not rid the practitioner of afflictive, obscuring states, are about worldly ideas, thoughts, opinions, and the like. Efforts not yielding the results listed here right now are just efforts of a worldly nature.
Ben hanam jekting na kapa cheshuchi lobjong chene kapa cheshuchi e shubina chamden de ke kazin dewa datarwa.
In terms of karecheshu,
lobjong toshu tepat cheshu.
In terms of disciples of Buddha Shakyamuni himself, there is the example of his cousin Devadatta, who was able to, on the basis of studies, contemplation and meditation, as set forth by the Buddha himself, accumulate, as it were, an immense amount of information by way of his intellect and the capacity of his intellect, rather, to the point where he was able to give discourses and so on the Buddha Dharma, and was therefore known as a great scholar. However, but because he did not eradicate the notion of a self, nor afflictive obscuring states, he ended up taking a very unfortunate rebirth in a hellish type of existence. Furthermore, individuals who practice meditation, but their efforts do not affect the notion of a self, nor their afflictive obscuring states, throughout the history of mankind, there have been reports about individuals who were clairvoyant, who were able to work miracles such as moving through space and so on. However, these individuals had not eradicated the notion of a self, nor their afflictive obscuring states. Therefore, they, at the end of their lives, went on to take yet another worldly rebirth. It doesn't help to have what appears to be outstanding and unusual qualities, clairvoyance and the like, in terms of attaining liberation from rebirth in worldly existences, unless combined with these unusual qualities, there is the realization of no self and so on. The qualities, or these achievements as it were, clairvoyance and so on their own won't make for liberation from taking yet another rebirth in a worldly existence.
Yonglula Samba Chanandra, Tar Gambetin Pabdu, Rung Semin de Linjoachitane.
So, the point of Buddhist meditation is to, by way of studies, contemplation, and meditation, make for a change as to one's mindset, the change which is about weakening the notion of a self and finally eradicating, as well as weakening the workings of afflictive, obscuring states and finally eradicate those states. That's the purpose of Buddhist meditation.
Nenga Tilatene, Nanjur Chumulare Pesondra. Ransom Chongbonde
Ransom Kyongpote
Dulna Dulwai.
Therefore, Milarepa, Tibet's well-known great yogi, said the following in this context. The Vinaya, a reference to the section of Buddha Shakyamuni's doctrine which to a great extent deals with Buddhist ethics. Vinaya is in the end about disciplining one's own mind. So it's about turning inwardly and trying to effect a change in terms of one's notion of a self and in terms of afflictive, obscuring states.
Ti nang kor shudung pen ngarang sim sarki dela tene tenchik de nyomong gwang dun roge endo dancing ge wang dun roge.
So one needs to observe one's mind to secure that the mind does not entertain the notion of a self nor afflictive, obscuring states. The mind stream, which is both vivid and knowing, the goal is to rid that mind stream of the notion of a self as well as of afflictive, obscuring states.
Tin rogen du samna te kasang kondu shue penan de sha gi nyembo xedong gi nyembo temu gi nyembo song song.
In the previous session, the author of the text we're going through listed remedies in terms of remedying attachments, in terms of remedying anger, hatred, in terms of remedying stupidity, ignorance. And so one needs to observe one's own mind in order to see what's happening, whether the mind is in the grip of attachments or in the grip of anger or in the grip of stupidity, as it were, and remedy those states. That's the purpose of studies, contemplation and meditation in Buddhism.
So,
last question. Book. Let's see. Why? wasn't it? You sent it to me by mail, didn't you? The last question, I can't find it.
내가 얘기 좀 못했어.
네 말이. 아. Oh dear, can you send it again?
No.
From your phone?
Not at the moment.
Well, where is it? I mean, it was there, I read it, and now I can't find it.
I sent
That's also.
Must be there.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, yeah. Next question. I have been fortunate to be part of your courses. Yes, okay, that's not a question. My question is related to Guru Yoga. I took the course with you and I would like to know if I need to have an empowerment of secret mantra from the Karma Cardio school to do the practice. I have received from Karma here in Mexico City back in 2006, Chenrezig and Amitayus empowerments. I have received the empowerments of Hiruka and Vajra Yogini practices from the Venerable Geshe Kelsang Gyatso Rinpoche. The same year, I received ordination also, I think there then. Nowadays, my main practices are Chenrezig and Pungpo Sumpeido and Bodhisattva. I've been praying to receive Karmapa's teachings to guide my Dharma practice for the benefit of others. I pray that Karmapa appears always in my mind with a rain of blessings to be able to have a peaceful and clear mind.
Yes.
Well, as you have received the Chenrezig empowerment from His Holiness the Karmapa yourself, you can do the Guru Yoga without receiving any additional empowerment, yes.
So that
ends the Q&A session. Sessions. You should sound up, Mari.
Re, Shologanish Zangar to your head, that he what ne that Sholokani Shutsangate, the Imbare. Janchub Sambatsoge, that Yamsha to Tai Kazan Kondushu with Chet. Yamsha, Dan Hoa Tamche Sem Tony, Ding on the Yambarjak to take Kondun Rotsarache.
So the previous session was primarily about the absolute perspective of the body-mind and how to develop in this context as a practitioner.
Tene Jetop tu Tene Nyomu Dosha Shedong Tene Ota Tenzo Chechuna Tepong Pechetu Lojong Gramba Tenzin Ipena Talasung.
As well as about practices with the aim of reducing and eradicating afflictive obscuring states such as attachment, anger, and the like.
That's somebody
by way of the various methods set forth in the cycle of teachings known as mind training.
Tene Karishu. That's somebody just says Chonchu Sembe, Chopala Lapsu.
The next part of the text deals with the behavior or conduct of a true bodhisattva. What that behavior or conduct should be, as it were.
That's Chonchu Sembe Chopatella, Gakbel Lapsat, Dripel Lapsa, Ni Yongi Nane.
And here there is advice in terms of what is to be given up and what is to be practiced.
That ring Karshe Digdosana, Dripel Lapsat Shegi.
And today, verse or practice number 25 in terms of the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva is about what to practice in the context of the path of a Bodhisattva. It's one of the perspectives in terms of what a Bodhisattva does or what a Bodhisattva practices.
Drupes labjat yapu ji chinsuna. Gakshok labjat drupes labjat minton so yinza
Now, once you have a comprehensive knowledge of what a Bodhisattva does, you will have knowledge of what a Bodhisattva should not do, because it's about the opposites of what a Bodhisattva does. So there isn't a great need for explaining what a Bodhisattva isn't supposed to do. It's sort of quite evident once one knows what a Bodhisattva does.
Okay. That drupal labja mongbo yuben nane. So duna drupal labja te parsin trugnan dugundu song.
Now, there are many actions on the path of a Bodhisattva, numerous actions in terms of what, or types of action in terms of what a Bodhisattva does. However, they can all be summed up in 6 categories known as the 6 deeds which transcend, or that transcend the ways of the world, the 6 paramitas.
다디 제용투 다드린 가바투 데르스나 짐베 파싱 클랍자틀라 투그레.
And the first of the 6 that's listed is that of generosity, which transcends the ways of the world.
다디 인도
Or generosity gone to the other shore, where the phrase gone to the other shore is a reference to an otherworldly type of generosity. So it's not generosity as we know it in the world. It's another type of generosity, the one which has gone to the other shore, i.e. otherworldly generosity.
다디 쇼로가 니시상가 반드린 바레. 데 송축 데베 류종 동거나 시를 뇌본 남라 묘지그 대시를 랭동 남은 미래에 젬바동 야세라는 인소.
And the verse reads as follows: those who want enlightenment must give even their bodies if needed, not to mention giving external things, to give generously without hope of reward or hope of result is the practice of a bodhisattva.
다디진도 송축 대배 세운데 다 임바동진 공사되게 송축 때 조부산지 공공지 톱나지 마랑 냠들 로연 킨지 근원아 소마레.
So the phrase "those who want enlightenment" is a reference to the kind of practitioner who is 100% focused on attaining Buddha, the enlightened state, for the sake of others, in order to benefit all sentient beings.
다디 다 송좀 되긴 되게 되는 산지지 공공 토비체도 짐바 파신 조발라 랑게 류장 예나 핀 토나 땅고고요.
And that practicing bodhisattva for the sake of attaining that goal needs to be prepared to give his own life, give his own body, as it were, if needed. That's the definition of generosity here. So we can see it's the kind of generosity which transcends the ways of the world.
다 된다고 용투에들 가르고 오근도 되다. 얘는 핀 딱그 템벨로데 양에 양도 감주는 거고요.
So the kind of person able to do this is someone who is one with the idea of benefiting others to the extent where there is no doubts or there are no doubts or hesitations in terms of laying down your own life for the sake of somebody else.
드네 대감난 신기 담자 양내 양등한 전 넘바신 등비에 양 성집심 그 담자들 오케이 간소 벤나 니마탁과 넘바신 등들 성집 이게 담자들 린대기요 봐.
Now, in our daily recitations, the practice methods involve committing to the path of a bodhisattva. There is always a part of the text that one recites which is about committing to the path of a bodhisattva.
다 딘데게 삼나들 감사 첨부지 감사지 레보나 된진다 체드 등문에 레투고도 와래가.
And if the practitioner is a person who has determined to do this, namely practice the path of a bodhisattva according to its principles, then once there is familiarity with that path, the practitioner is able to give up his own life if needed, for the sake of others.
pen kringaza di name the tray on to doctor the nurse mongbu round down the lekalegido.
And there are examples of people like that today. All of them may not have committed to the Buddhist path, but evidently they behave like bodhisattvas, which means their mindset is the mindset of a bodhisattva. Whether you're a member of a Buddhist community or not is not the point. You have many medical staff, nurses, doctors and others who participate in treating people affected by COVID-19, and in the process of doing so lose their lives, and this is something they knew would perhaps happen to them, but that didn't hold them back. They still went to work, did the medical care they did, for the sake of saving the lives of the ill.
Penangé kaza yagagi sanjuji tevi tene the kish genetic jinjupa delige holocaust sing menkana lekalenke nurse jindu agalwas.
Now, Khenpo watched an Indian news channel the other day which reported about the pandemic in India, and there is a hospital, I don't know if it has branches also perhaps, in New Delhi, in South Delhi. It's run by a Christian organization, and the name of the hospital is the Holy Cross. And there, the news channel in question had interviewed a nurse who worked at this hospital by the name Miss Agarwal.
Tata Tritichen Menkantina Yone, Nepal Zemeke, Dawachik the Sheke in Leka Landua.
Tenishi song Rebe.
She do more Tanda in Lady.
Yeah. And at the time of the interview, she had been working more or less continuously there for a month and a half. And prior to taking on this challenging effort, she had arranged for her will to be made and so on and so forth, knowing that she might not be able to return home alive. At the time of the interview, of course, she was still alive. And that was the decision she had taken because of her compassion for those suffering in the pandemic.
When Morang interviewed the Morange Tanda Kanko. Jesus is a long to
she had referred to a statement made by Jesus Christ himself, I suppose, perhaps from the Bible, We do not know. However, she said that Jesus Christ said the following. Jesus Christ had given the following advice to his followers at the time. If you're able to save the lives of 2 or more people at the cost of your own life, then you should go ahead, because 2 or more lives are saved rather than just one, your own.
And
this is the advice she based her decision on, namely to just go ahead and do the medical work at the hospital in question, even though she knew that she might not survive those efforts. So we can see that in various religions, the founders have given advice that are extraordinary and very beneficial. Now, Buddhists talk a lot about the path of a Bodhisattva and the like. However, if one isn't really able to put these words into action, as it were, then it's just empty words. It's just about having a conversation. Now, this nurse, of course, she had no idea, presumably, about the path of a Bodhisattva or any other perspective as to Buddhism. She was of another religion. However, her mindset is that of a Bodhisattva.
Yeah, same thing. There are
not many who would take the same decision, presumably. So, if in terms of how a Bodhisattva behaves, this holds true, namely that one gives one's own life for the sake of saving others, then we don't even need to discuss being generous with material things. It should be evident that being generous with material things is a given in the context of the path of a Bodhisattva. Furthermore, material things are very often a cause for trapping oneself in the world, meaning not being able to move away from the world, because one's attachments to one's possessions are such that one isn't able to leave one's possessions behind. One's possessions are a great concern. However, all possessions are sort of meaningless in that they are impermanent. They do not last. We need food and shelter, evidently. This much one needs, but beyond that, one doesn't need much. being attached to possessions beyond food and shelter is just a cause for further trapping oneself in worldly existences.
다 계시슈데 직심한들에 대실 렌탕 남은 미래와 생겼. 다 상심선배 짐박문에 칸데 직차위였으나 세나 렌남 미래와 송어데.
So next the author says to give generously without hope of reward or hope of result, that is the practice of a bodhisattva. So there shouldn't be concerns with either reward or hopes of result or results. So whether one, for example, gives a sum of money of just 10 cents or 10 millions, the main point isn't the size of the amount that's given. The main point in terms of the behavior of a bodhisattva is to give generously without hopes of reward or result.
So
even though the amount may not be very sizable, there is great merit in giving, when the generosity isn't tainted by hopes of reward or result. Whereas if one gives a large amount of money, for example, while entertaining hopes of reward and hopes of result, then this is worldly generosity. That's an example of worldly generosity. So the size of the gift isn't what determines to what extent the gift is beneficial. So one needs to be aware of one's own mindset while one gives. So in whatever way one is generous, one needs to see to that the generosity is otherworldly, not tainted by selfish motives, so that one's act or acts of generosity contribute towards progress in terms of attaining Buddha, the enlightened state. That's all for today.